Hi, I'm Femi OK, and you're in the stream. Today, Peru's election shakeup. Two of the country's main presidential candidates have been barred from running, leaving some questioning the legitimacy of next month's vote. Peru's presidential race has been thrown into upheaval with two of the main candidates disqualified from running. Now, the country's National Jury of Elections struck down Cesar Acuna's candidacy for vote buying and Julio Guzman's because they say his candidacy was not registered properly. But Guzman and his supporters say the ruling is political. A relatively unknown economist until a few months ago, Guzman recently emerged as the main challenger to frontrunner Keiko Fujimori, casting himself as an outsider in a race filled with familiar faces. Now, according to one poll, around about 70% of Peruvians are looking for an alternative to Fujimori, while Guzman appealed to 63% of those looking for a new figure. So, we are going to take a look at how this development might affect the upcoming election. Helping us do that, our digital producer Malika Bilal. She's already been researching online and
found so many hashtags.
Right.
And they're coming from all sides. All of them are in Spanish, of course, around this election. So take a look at some of the ones we've gathered. Now, one of the biggest ones with more than 7,000 mentions is JNE Respect the Law. That's one that's criticizing the voter electoral board that Femi mentioned that barred the candidates from running. And those in staunch support of Keiko Fujimori, on the other hand, are using this hashtag. They're assuring voters that she will stand up to corruption. And this last one, with more than 5,000 mentions, is one that people have been using to be adamant in saying Fujimori no more. Now, we want to hear what you think, so tweet us with our hashtag AJStream.
So to help us unpack this conversation, we're joined by Alejandro Sanchez, a Peruvian international security expert based right here in Washington, D.C. We're joined on Skype from Lima by Francisco Sagasti from Todos por el Peru, or the Everyone for Peru party. Raul Benavides is the CEO of the online news source Diario, Altavoz, or the Daily Speaker. Miklos Lukacs is a professor at the en.esan Graduate School of Business. Gentlemen, good to have you here. I want to show you something on my laptop, gentlemen. Here's a headline from an American online magazine or outlet. It says, an alleged killer, a plagiarist, and a jailed ex-leader's kid meet Peru's presidential field. It's been somewhat thinned out now because things are changing quite fast in the election campaign. But Miklos, how typical is this of an election season in Peru? Is this unusual? So much drama?
No, well, Peruvian elections are characterized by drama. It's a ritual we repeat every 5 years. And what I can see is that elections have got nastier. We know the polarization between parties is just, you can divide it in two big blocks, the Fujimoristas and anti-Fujimoristas. So I would say that dichotomy underpins the whole electoral race here in the country.
Okay, we do have a candidate or a potential candidate, Francisco, in our mix. Francisco, but as of today, can you still run?
No, as of today, we cannot run. But let me come back to the question that you asked Miklos.
Yeah.
Part of the problem is also because we have a very cumbersome electoral law. It's a total mess, to put it mildly. We had a law which is very detailed and demands such minute things from the political parties that it's almost impossible for anyone to really stand up and comply with everything. But to make things worse, the Congress passed another law halfway into the electoral process. So nobody knows whether the old law or the new law is the one that applies. And to make things even worse, the National Electoral Board and one of its subsidiaries made contradictory statements in terms of rulings in favor or against one candidate or another. And then one of the the lower level courts, electoral courts, approved that our candidate in Todos por el Peru would be running, just to reverse itself 180 degrees 1 week later.
Francisco, this sounds confusing, or is it just confusing because I'm not Peruvian?
No. It's confusing to everybody, and even in Peru, we're even more confused. Nobody knows exactly what is going on.
Yikes.
Nobody knows what the motivations are. And there is a great deal of suspicion about corruption and other interests behind some of the decisions of the Electoral Board.
I would venture to say that people online completely agree with you, at least some of them. We got this tweet from Akome. He says, I can't think of a democracy anywhere in the world in which major presidential contenders are excluded from minor infractions. But there is some pushback. And Alejandro, I'll pass this to you. This person says, well, this is because one of those candidates didn't respect our laws, and one of them gives money, and the other one didn't respect the administrative process. So they seem to be saying this was meant to happen if you don't respect Peruvian laws.
Well, the problem is that we keep changing the law every few months or every few weeks sometimes. So like my colleagues have said, it gets very convoluted. Additionally, the accusations against Cesar Acuna, well, yes, he did violate the law because he gave money to Peruvian citizens, which we're not supposed to do. It wasn't even that much money, and there were only 2 isolated cases. He gave 10,000 soles, which is around $3,000, give or take, depending on the exchange rate, for some people in some street vendors in Chosica, outside of Lima, to build a wall to protect themselves from mudslide. And then he gave money to a disabled person in Piura, I believe, in the north of the country, so he could purchase a handicapped a wheelchair. So it's not like he was just giving money like left and right.
It wasn't like, here's some money, I'm buying your vote.
Correct. Keiko Fujimori has done that. There are accusations that she has been doing that for the past few months. Just last week, there was a major rally in Cajamarca, in North Peru. There are accusations that she gave money, around 40 soles, which is like around less than $20 right now due to the exchange rate, to motorcycle drivers, like motorcycle/taxi drivers. There's a combination of instead of a taxi in a car, it's a taxi in a motorcycle. She gave them money so they will attend a rally and cheer for her. So I think that's the problem for a lot of Peruvians, that they're not just upset that some candidates are violating the law, like Acuna, like Guzman, but others are doing it as well, like Fujimori, but they're getting away with it because she's a Fujimori.
Let me just show you the presidential candidates. It's not as up-to-date as it could be, because a couple of people are now no longer running. So we've got Acuna, who is now disqualified. Let me just scroll down a little bit. Oresti, who is out of the race as well. Guzman we mentioned too. But Raul, let me bring you into this conversation. Is this an unusual election season? Is there something very special about this election season? What do you think has happened with these disqualifications, with people standing down?
I think it's unusual for sure. I think in past years, people would never expect a candidate to be turned down because of a problem in the process of internal processes, or even with a fault like giving money out to people. So I think this year the National Electoral Board is being very strict with the rules, and we weren't used to it. And that's the issue I think is on hand.
Why,
I think there
why
is
are they
an
stricter
aspect,
this time around?
No,
I think it's an intent to institutionalize political parties. And the problem in Peru is every time they try to institutionalize political parties, what they do is they start with a law. And that's not normally how you start something. It's not organic. And I think that might be one of the problems with what's happening right now in Peru.
Sure.
Yeah, but let me just jump in on this matter, because I hear that we in Todos por el Perú and Guzman broke the law. It's not true. What is basically is a different interpretation from the national political parties registry and our own interpretation. They argue that some political militants in our party were not members simply because they were not informed a few months earlier that they had been joining the party. So it's just a question of timing, and that has as a consequence a change in the quorum.
See, Francisco,
so
let me help everybody understand this, because even you said it was complicated for people in Peru. So this is not complicated. He was number 2 in the polls. That is not a complicated thing to understand. Let me show you here. This is from Guzman's YouTube channel from January. Look at the crowds.
Julio, amigo.
Big crowds, number 2 in the polls. Those two things, could they be connected, Alejandro?
I think that there are people in power, the powers that be in Peru, that want Fujimori to come. They want a Fujimori back in power. the people that most profited from the Fujimori presidency were the extremes of the socioeconomic classes, the poorest and the richest.
Right.
And there have been a lot of accusations that polling companies like GFK, like Datum, like Ipsos in Peru, have been carrying out polls to support Fujimori, to make her look better and make the other candidates look less popular or worse than Fujimori. And my colleagues can definitely talk about that more in detail.
It's interesting that you said that. I want to share just some of the comments that we're getting online about how popular some of these candidates are. This is Adrian, who writes to us in Spanish. She says, this disbarring or disqualification, it doesn't affect anything. He, meaning Guzman, is an ephemeral candidate in a political party with not much force or hold, supported by the caviars, he puts in quotes, and he means the leftist bourgeois. On the other hand, though, we got strong words there, clearly, but then there's just as strong support for him. This is a video comment we got from Enrique. Miklos, I want you to have a listen to this.
Democracy is being undermined by our laws. Actually, our parties are taking advantage of the laws to take out candidates of running for the elections, which goes against popular demand.
So Miklos, you're saying you're going against what people actually want?
No, I am actually, I would have to question Francisco Sagasti's position in the sense that this has been a minor fault. I agree with him fully that the electoral law is very complicated, but Guzman's failure has not been minimal. It's basically the fact that in December, they conduct.
All right, so we're going to come back to Miklos. We just had him froze there for a moment. Raul, I'm just wondering, does this mean that the election campaign on the election that comes after it, I believe it's April the 10th, does it mean that it will still be a legitimate election?
I think it is. I think there's a problem here with what Todos por el Peru, Guzman's party has done. They're trying to bring down the whole election process by saying it's illegitimate because they've been banned from the election. The truth is, it is a lot more complicated. It's not black or white. There is a problem with the interior democracy of Todos por el Peru. There is also an argument that says that it's more important to have the sovereign right of Guzman of being a candidate. So I understand that view too, but I don't think it affects the legitimacy of the candidacy. What I do think is that it sends a horrible precedent for future elections, because in future elections, people are going to start trying to ban other candidates to win elections, and I think that's a horrible precedent, and I think that would be very, very bad for politics in Peru and for democracy.
But we have to be clear that Peruvian elections have always been, and I'm sorry to interrupt you, but just to say one quick thing, Peruvian elections have always been dirty, have always been complicated. I mean, just starting with our constitution, we used to have a constitution back from 1979, I believe, and then there was a new one that was created in 1992 when Fujimori, the father, came to power. Now we have one electoral law that just got changed. So we always have this, we always seem to be like, we're almost like trying to build a plane while we're flying it almost. We always have like these changes and it just makes more of a mess. And I think that's what's going on right now with the Guzman case, for example. That is not the first time it has happened and it definitely won't be the last. And when it comes to setting precedents, every 5 years we set a new precedent of how dirty Peruvian politics can get. So in this case, from an international position, this is nothing really, and for any Peruvian that knows Peruvian politics, we know that this is part of Peruvian history.
Francisco, so you're just a casualty of dirty Peruvian politics?
Well, let me put it this way. Julio Guzman is the only candidate that is new, that has no corruption, that hasn't been involved in any of the last 3 or 4 governments that have presidents indicted for corruption, that, all of them have been questions. Guzman is a new person with a new view. And let me just read a very brief statement he made this morning. We got into politics to do the things in a different way. I'm quoting him and translating while I'm reading him. And that is the reason why the corrupt powers have made everything they can in order to take us out of the race. This value to do politics in a different way, honestly, clean, and inclusive is what is going to guide all the decisions that we are going to take. And the reason, this is what Julio is saying. And by the way, a point that was made by Raul about legitimacy and so on, there is a very clear difference between legal and legitimate. Legal means that you follow the law to the details and so on. Legitimate means that people and the citizens recognizes as fair and valuable what has been going on. When you have 20% of the electorate who was supporting Julio Guzman taken out of the election, when you take the candidate and really do not allow 20% of the population to express freely their will and their interest for a minor technicality, and I would, I know it's very complex, but it really, believe me, it's a minor technicality in comparison to what has happened anywhere. And when that happens, the elections may be legal, but I don't consider them legitimate.
And I
think it makes sense. I think it makes sense for you not to consider legitimate, being you are a candidate for Todos por Peru. That's, I think, understandable. What I'm trying to say is, I'm not trying to say it's the right decision to take Todos por Peru out. I'm not sure. I just think that there is an argument on both sides. It's not black or white. And the only thing I would also say is that I think Julio Guzman and people from Todos por Peru haven't been just to what has happened. What has happened is that the National Electoral Board has made a decision that might be contestable. It is something that you might not agree with, but it is a complicated decision. I think just saying outright that it's corrupt, that Peruvian politics are dirty because of this,
But it's you who said that, Raul. It's you who said that politics is dirty. Is all the rest. I haven't said that.
I said that.
I'm sorry.
Actually, Raul, people online are also saying that when we asked our community, particularly, of course, Peruvians, what they thought were the issues that needed to be looked at, again and again, we got tweets like this. This is from Pabs, and at the top of the list of issues they think are important is the fight against corruption. This is just one of several we got.
Yes.
But I want to push this on just a little bit, because knowing that,
Yes.
keeping that in mind, whether or not the front runner in this campaign can take that fight where it needs to be is in question. This is Jose Enrique. He says many people don't like Keiko Fujimori because they think she will bring back her father's politics to the country. Miklos, can you explain what that means?
Well, thank you. I would appreciate having a fair share of participation in this debate. What I would like to say is, first of all, regarding the registration of Guzman's party and presidential list, it was not only illegal, it was illegitimate. Francisco Sagasti says that it was legitimate. It wasn't. Originally, Guzman's party had registered 55 members in the statutes of the party to choose the presidential list. Only 5 of those members were called for an extraordinary assembly in December, which was not informed to the registry of
Miklos, I don't want
processes.
to rehash this because we've only got a few minutes left on this conversation, and I think that the front runner is important to talk about that as well. I take it, I understand it, and we did explain this at the very beginning. Let's push on just a little bit because we only have so much time.
Yeah, well, I have participated like 2 minutes, and
do you know what? Right now, we're not having a debate that's a politician's debate. We're having a conversation. So no one in a conversation says, I had 2 minutes, I had 3 minutes, I had 2 minutes. We're wasting time. Let's push on.
Well, again, I mean, if I can continue.
Please, I do not want to go through the detail, though, of...
No. So basically, Guzman... his candidacy, his list is not legally registered. He's an invention of the polls and the media. And
all right, let's recap. Hold tight for a minute, Miklos. Malika, remind us of that question you just pushed out there, because it's not being answered right now.
Well, some people online are saying that Keiko Fujimori is reminding people of the legacy of her father, who, of course, is jailed Alberto Fujimori. And whether or not that's a good thing is what's debated.
Malik, if I can take on this question, I think
go ahead.
for a lot of people, it is a good thing. There is a lot of people who support Fujimori and who vote for Keiko because of her father. I think that's, nobody can doubt that. That's a political legacy she has inherited. I also think that it's unfair to say that she has anything to do with banning the other running mate, because I think at the end of the day, she's the one that least would win from it. She's already first, and by a lot. I don't think anybody would predict her from falling from first place, at least in the first election round. And I think the people she's running against now would be better adversaries in second round than Julio Guzman. So I think
something that we need to explain to the viewers. Let's be clear on something. Peruvian presidential elections are run on a simple majority. Essentially, if you get more than 50%, you win the presidency. That never happens. There's always a runoff between the two major candidates. We know that Keiko is going to be one of them with 30%. What I think the supporters of Fujimori are afraid of, and I will use that word afraid of, is that in the second round, everybody's going to band up together to support the other candidate who's going to run against Fujimori. This is what happened already in 2011, when you had the two final candidates were Keiko Fujimori and now President Ollanta, and even people that were not particularly fans of Humala decided to vote for him in order to make sure that another Fujimori will not return to power. I think that the Fujimori party, her blog, wants to make sure that Keiko can win the first round by getting more than 50%, which, with around a month to go before the elections, that's really not going to happen. Another question is, will she most likely run against in the runoff, because nobody's going to get to 50%.
All right, so Miklos, go ahead, Miklos.
Yes, there's a possibility that I don't think Keiko is in 30%. I think Keiko is getting closer to 40%, and she has a very real chance of winning this election in the first round. I would also say that the argument that Guzman was high in the polls does not overrule the fact that we have to respect the law. And that 18% that came up and just gave momentum to the candidacy of Guzman was not, it's a very, very unreliable result, in the sense that polls in Peru 1 month before the elections have variations in the results from 5 to 15%. So it's absolutely outrageous to claim that he had a fifth of the vote. He didn't have anything. He was, as I say, he's an invention of the media. He's an invention of the polls, whose main objective is to not allow for Keiko to come to power.
Well, this is precisely what we have seen in traditional politicians, Miklos, I'm sorry to say. They don't want to see
not
reality.
A traditional politician.
That's
a reality.
No, the reality is a very different one. Julio Guzman is a very real candidate. It has mobilized and energized young people all over the country. It has 25 to 30% in the south, and you have seen the polls very clear.
Facebook.
So,
that's not
in
real.
other words, no. The difficulty is that they don't see what they don't want to see.
Gentlemen, hold tight for a moment, because I can only hear one other person. Francisco, I want to give you a little insight into what Francisco was doing just before we started our show. He was off to one side, taking phone calls, making notes to work out what you were going to do for your party next. What's the plan? Briefly, Francisco, what are you going to do now? Your candidate has been disqualified.
Well, at present we cannot run. One of the things we are not going to do is to endorse any other candidate to start with. We are different, we are separate. I mean, Peru is an ecological country from the political perspective. All the candidates that are up there are recycled. They go from one party to another. They come back, Mrs. Fujimori's vice presidential candidate was with another party before, and so on. They all are playing the same game, sort of musical chairs games among themselves. So we are not going to endorse any one of those. We are going to respect the law. There is no question about that. But we are also going to be able to exercise our right not to consider this a fair an election.
All right, Francisco, hold tight. Raul and Miklos and Alejandro, we will take you to our online post show to continue our conversation there. Malika?
I'll leave us with this tweet from Ross, who says, people want a choice and they do not like when that choice goes away. The people will determine if the election is legit.
So we're talking about the Peruvian election campaign. If you want to weigh in on that, very easy to do. Go to stream.altavoz.pe. You can continue our conversation online, and also tweet Malika at #AJStream. Alejandro, Francisco, Raul, Miklos, see you in a moment at stream.altavoz.pe. Thanks for watching, everybody. Hello again, this is the Streams Online Post Show. We're talking about next month's Peruvian elections. So let's get back to that conversation. One of the things we didn't talk about really were what are the biggest issues that people are considering as they're working out who do they want to vote for? Raul, what do you think was the biggest issue right now?
I think one of the biggest issues right now is knowing who's running. Because
knowing who's running? That's like 101.
Yeah,
elections. That's not an issue. That's admin.
I'll explain it. That's what happens in Peru. Such
Yikes.
in Peru.
Okay.
And I'll just tell you quickly what has happened and why I think it's sent a horrible precedent. What's happened with Todos por el Peru.
Wow.
And what's happened is now they're trying to ban all their candidates. So
who's
in the case
let's slow down a bit. Who is they? Who's the they in that?
They are a lot of political players. And I'm not meaning todo por el Peru. I wasn't saying Julio Guzman was a ban candidate. What I'm saying is that there are political forces that are trying to win by banning candidates. So what's happened recently is in the media they have accused Peruanos por el Cambio, which is the political party who's second, of also having problems with their interior democracy, and they've also accused Keiko Fujimori of giving money and incurring in the same problem as Acuna. So we have a political background in which people don't know what's really happening and how the Jurado Nacional, the National Electoral Board, what they should do, right? So I think that's very problematic right now.
That is really problematic. If the biggest issue is working out who's actually running, you don't even get to what does Peru need right now and going forward. Miklos, for you, what would you say was for the electorate the biggest issue for them right now?
I think I agree with what my friend has just said from altavoz. Uncertainty is very, very prevalent in the country right now. And as I said at the beginning of the program, there's a very clear divide between Fujimoristas and anti-Fujimoristas. So I think the media is playing a big role in tandem with the polls to misinform people. This is open.
Do you want to explain that a little bit? Do you want to explain that a little bit more?
Because
I'm obviously we're not reading the Peru press. Yeah, explain that.
Yes, very happily. They have, as I said, the main point of the agenda is to avoid the victory of Keiko Fujimori, and they will do whatever it takes to avoid this victory. The other thing is that they have created this invented candidate from polls, which are, as I said before, very unpredictable, very unreliable, at least 1 month before. And the other thing is that citizens have responded against media bias. So you will see if you get into Twitter, Peruvian Twitter accounts, most of them, they have published pictures of the real size of the mass rallies, supposed mass rallies that Guzman has. Actually, media portrays like he has thousands of people following him. And the reality is that there are less than 100, less than 50. I mean, it was ridiculous. And you can see this on Twitter. It's not an opinion, it's a fact. That's the difference between opinions and facts. It's documented, it's registered. And just to say that in Peru, the mood right now, at least in the social networks and on the streets, is that on the streets, very few know what Guzman has to offer because he has played the victim all these elections, so no proposals are known. And the second one is that on the social networks, it's massive. The approval for the compliance of the law by the national jury is absolutely massive. So I think this is important. So citizen power coming to control, this opposition, this anti-Fujimorista opposition, which makes me extremely happy. I mean, the people of Peru are waking up.
I have to jump in.
Just for someone who appears to be so knowledgeable of networks, obviously you haven't even read the proposals, and you were generous enough to praise my own work. Well, read our plan, and you'll see that Julio Guzman is the only one that is proposing long-term issues on science and technology, proposals and so on. So you were asking before, what are the main issues before the electorate? And the first one is corruption. And what happens with all the other candidates, they are tainted by corruption. There is no question about that. The second issue is security. and they do not, the last 30 or 40 years have increased insecurity. The third issue, and the one that we have put, and please do go and read that, Miklos, because I'm sure you will find something interesting that perhaps may open your mind, is the idea that we're going to invest in people, in talents. We are inspired by Amartya Sen and the concept of capabilities and so on, and the work that I have been doing over the last 35, 40 years on designing a long-term strategy for the future of the country is one of the inputs into this process. So what I'm trying to point out is that there's plenty of ideas. It's not an invented candidate that came in there. There was a very careful strategy. And so
gentlemen,
and the reality is
gentlemen, let me just make a little bit of space because I want to get our online community in. We've been talking about Twitter. Let's go to Twitter.
Well, this is a question, or actually, it is a pledge from someone named Farid, picking up on something that one of our guests said, that I believe it was Miklos. I'll pass this over to you, though, Alejandro. This is Farid. He says, Fujimori to win in the first round is out of reality. I bet any amount of money against it. Who is ready to take him on, is what he's saying. But I'm wondering what you think is going to happen next month. What do you see coming up in the first round?
I think that unfortunately for, you can say democracy, Guzman and Acuna are out of the competition. Now the question is who is going to run against Fujimori? Who will the supporters of Acuna and Guzman go to? We have seen a spike in the polls for Pedro Pablo Kuczynski, a former economist businessman. He's doing pretty well. Veronica Mendoza, who is an extreme left candidate, a congresswoman, she's also doing very well. Former President Garcia of the APRA and former President Toledo.
What is very well, though? You mentioned Veronica. I have her here because actually this is a picture of Veronica Mendoza. Actually, a few of our community members wrote to us saying that she was the candidate they preferred. This is one tweet from Sonko who says, it's a difficult question, but she's the best, even though I'm skeptical.
I will stress that we say in Spanish, el antivoto, the anti-vote, the fear and the dislike for Fujimori is still very strong in Peru, and the polls show that. So people will rally around a candidate who runs against Fujimori. I do believe she's going to run to the second round, to get to the second round. That's a given. Who she will run against, that's really the question. I think maybe PPK, Pedro Pablo Kuczynski, will be able to do it. But like you said, Mendoza is going in there. APRA, former President Garcia wants to be president again. And
that would be a third time.
Third time. And actually, that's really important for the next president, because the next president is going to rule from 2016 until 2021. 2021 is a bicentennial anniversary of Peru's independence from 1821. So it's going to be very symbolic for the next president to say, I was president, in our 200th anniversary. So there's a motivation for everybody to not just be president because they want to be head of state, but also because of the symbolism of that in 5 years.
So I have to say, gentlemen, you have taught me at least one thing, and that is that politics in Peru is never, ever boring. To the electorate, good luck! What can I say?
Let me add something to what you said.
On your own.
It said that in Peru, almost anything can happen and usually happens.
Oh my goodness. Wow.
Now
I'm going to put my search engine translate on all of the newspapers in Peru just to keep up with the drama that is happening there between now and April the 10th. If your main issue is working out who is running, good luck with that. So thank you to Alejandro, Francisco, Raul, and Miklos. I really appreciated your conversation and your time this afternoon. Take care, everybody.